Today we will be talking about photosynthesis and cellular respiration. So what is photosynthesis?
Photosynthesis is the process that uses sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide. It is when green plants and some other organisms use sunlight to synthesize food from CO2 and H2O. Photosynthesis in plants generally involve the green pigment chlorophyll, which captures the sunlight energy and uses it to generate food in order for the plant to grow. It also generates oxygen as a byproduct.
The balance equation for photosynthesis includes 6 carbon dioxide plus 6 water molecules, which yields to 6 carbon, 12 hydrogen, and 6 oxygen, plus another 6 oxygen molecules.
There are 2 different stages that occur in photosynthesis: light reaction, which does need light to occur, and Calvin cycle, which doesn't need light to occur. Inside the plant are little green pigments called chlorophyll. Inside the chlorophyll are little stacks called granums, and within those little stacks there are individual pancakes called thylakoids, and that is where light reaction occurs.
The purpose of the light-dependent reaction is to convert light energy into chemical energy to be used in the Calvin cycle. This process is accomplished when sunlight hits the chlorophyll that absorbs light into electrons inside of it. This then creates kinetic energy, which makes electrons bounce around inside the membrane to different chlorophylls. Electrons are then absorbed by NADP+ to create NADPH. The light energy used in the beginning of the reactions is then absorbed by ADP to create ATP. Due to the fact that the chlorophylls will have lost electrons, they use H2O to replenish the lost electron. This action thus creates the byproduct O2.
After the light reaction, the next stage is the Calvin cycle. The Calvin cycle is also occurring in the chlorophyll, but in the stroma of the chlorophyll. So the Calvin cycle occurs immediately after the light reaction cycle, and what it does is it takes all the chemical energy made in the light reaction cycle. In this case, that's NADPH and ATP. And it takes the electrons out of NADPH and the light energy out of ATP, and it uses that chemical energy to convert O2 into glucose, which is what we want out of photosynthesis. But remember, because it took the electron out of NADPH and it took the light energy out of ATP, those 2 chemical energies go back to their original precursors of NADP+ and ADP. A pesticide that can affect the photosynthesis process is called Bipedilerium.
There are 2 Bipedilerium herbicides registered for use in Florida, Diquat and Paraquat. They are contact non-selective materials, causing a rapid wilting of foliage with a frostbitten appearance. Their mechanism of action is caused by the rapid destruction of plant cell membranes, particularly in sunlight. The Bipedilerium herbicide affects photosynthesis by making the supply of free electrons cease, which prevents electrons from bouncing around, thus preventing NADPH from being made. This process prevents glucose from being produced, thus causing the leaf to wilt.
So basically, Bipedilerium stops the reproduction of electrons, which also stops NADP+ from picking up the electrons to make NADPH, and then that collectively prevents glucose from being made. Now that we're familiar with photosynthesis, we can now move on to cellular respiration.
The 3 types of reactions that occur in the process of cellular respiration are glycolysis, the Krebs cycle, and oxidative phosphorylation. The balanced equation of cellular respiration includes 6 hydrogen, 12 oxygen, and 6 oxygen plus another 6 oxygen molecules, which yields 6 carbon dioxide molecules plus 6 water molecules.
Cellular respiration takes place in the mitochondria. Inside of the mitochondria, there are different parts: the inner membrane space, the outer membrane, and the mitochondrial matrix.
As for glycolysis, this occurs in the cytoplasm of the mitochondria, which is just the outer part that kind of resembles jelly. In glycolysis, we're completely breaking down glucose. So in order to break it down, we need to use energy and use electrons. So we take our ATP, we release some energy, result in 2 ADPs. And though we lose energy, we do need to gain some. So we take 4 ADPs, we gain some energy, and we get 4 ATPs. And because we also need to release electrons, we take our NAD pluses and we gain electrons and we get NADHs. And we end up with 2 pyruvates at the end of this.
In the Krebs cycle, a pyruvate is broken down into acetyl-CoA, which then breaks down into 3 CO2 molecules and a hydrogen molecule. For this process to happen, ADP turns into ATP, gaining energy, and NAD plus turns into 3 NADHs, and FADH plus turns into FADH2, gaining electrons. And you do this process by 2.
As for the products of the Krebs cycle, according to our diagram before, we have 1 ATP, 3 NADHs, and 1 FADH squared. But remember, this process is times 2 because we have 2 pyruvates, so we end up multiplying all the products by 2. We end up with 2 ATPs, 6 NADHs, and 2 FADH squares. As for oxidative phosphorylation, this whole cycle occurs in the outer membrane, the inner membrane space, and the mitochondrial matrix. What happens in this cycle is that electrons are released into the electron transport chain when NADH releases them and then goes back to its precursor of NAD+. The main purpose of these electrons is to shoot up the hydrogens from the mitochondrial matrix into the inner membrane space. Once all the hydrogens are in the inner membrane space, it creates the hydrogen gradient. Now we know that molecules like to move from high concentration to low concentration, and the only way to do that is to go back down to the ATP synthase. And once it does that, it creates kinetic energy. ADP captures that, turns it into ATP. Hydrogen's down there, then mixes with the oxygen, which is the final electron carrier, and the electrons, and it turns into H2O.
So what is pyruvate carboxylase deficiency? It creates more lactic acid, which then reduces the amount of oxygen. This means that fermentation must occur. In the long run, because of the more lactic acid, this will make your bones hurt. Ouch! Thanks for watching!